Welcome to the heart of Russia, the ancestral lands of Ukraine, pagan Poland. For millennia, the Slavic people gazed at the heavens, not seeking a singular god, but a pantheon of hundreds, a furious thunderer, a life-giving sun, a wily old trickster dwelling in the swamps. But around the year 1000 AD, a different kind of lightning struck. It wasn't the axe of Purin, but the cross of Byzantium. And with the baptism of Prince Vladimir of Kiev, the light of the new faith didn't illuminate, but rather, it erased. Temples were reduced to ash, oak idols were cast into the Dnieper River, and pagan priests were silenced. The Slavic pantheon was sentenced to oblivion, buried alive beneath the solid bedrock of Orthodox Christianity. However, unlike the mythologies of Greece or Rome, the Slavic faith was never fully codified or set in stone. It was a religion whispered from the earth, alive in custom and superstition, and that very fluidity made it incredibly resilient. What the Church couldn't eradicate, it was forced to absorb. Moist Mother Earth became the Virgin Mary. The god of thunder transformed into Saint Elijah, and Veles, the lord of the underworld, was camouflaged as Saint Blaise, patron saint of livestock. The old gods didn't die. They simply moved house, relocating from the Lisba church, from the grand temple of Kiev, to the dark corner of the kitchen. They continued to exist in the fear felt by the old woman venturing out at midnight, in the bowl of milk left on the hearth for the domovoi, the house spirit, and in the harvest songs that are still sung. This is a world where the witch Baba Yaga travels in a mortar, using a pestle as a rudder and sweeping away her tracks with a broom. A realm where the life force of Kashai the Deathless isn't in his body, but hidden inside a needle, inside an egg, inside a duck, inside a chest, buried beneath an oak tree. This isn't just fantasy. It's the complex Slavic cosmogony that understands the soul as something that must be disassembled to be understood. This documentary isn't a history lesson. It's an archaeological expedition into the Slavic soul. Our mission is clear, and perhaps a little dangerous, to journey back in time through the Byline, the epic poems of the Hieronites, the Bogaders, to unearth the oldest fairy tales, and to read between the lines of the chronicles penned by monks who, despite wanting to destroy it, accidentally preserved fragments of this ancient faith. We're going to reconstruct the world as seen by the pagans of Eastern Europe, a three-dimensional cosmos divided between Prav, the celestial realm of law, Yav, our manifested world, and Nav, the underworld ruled by Veles. We will listen to the roar of Purin, the god of thunder, and understand why his eternal conflict with Veles, the serpent god of magic and wealth, is the heartbeat that gives life to the entire Slavic universe. If you're ready to leave behind the mythologies you already know and immerse yourself in the untamed magic of the forests, the rivers, and the ancestors, prepare yourself. The journey north has just begun. Before you settle in, please take a moment to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from all corners of the globe. I'm the Night Historian, and my goal is to immerse you in a unique experience as you drift off to sleep. This is where we place the compass and the map at the heart of the narrative. If the journey north is the hook, this section is the promise of the reward, the structure that assures the viewer that the documentary will have meaning and purpose. The complex and vast Slavic cosmos may, at first glance, seem like a tangled web of water spirits, flying witches, and thunder gods. But at the center of all this magic lies a simple and powerful force, an inexhaustible engine, which is, in fact, the central theme we will explore in this documentary. We speak of perpetual duality, the eternal conflict that not only defines the relationship between heaven and earth but governs the cycle of the seasons, the storms, and life itself. This cosmic engine is none other than the rivalry between Purin and Veles. Purin, the god of thunder, the oak, the axe, and the law, represents order. His realm is the daytime sky, authority, the visible, and the stable. Purin is the sovereign who keeps the manifested world in its place, the guardian of Oz, and the protector of the warrior. In total contrast, we have Veles, the serpent god, the woolly one, the protector of cattle, magic, and poetry. Veles dwells in the depths of the earth and water, in the underworld of the dead, Nav. He is chaos, the hidden, the primordial, the wild, the master of wealth, and the trickster. Their clash, narrated in fragments through folklore, isn't a struggle of good versus evil, but a dynamic of necessary tension. Perrin pursues Veles for stealing his cattle or abducting his wife, and every lightning bolt that strikes a tree or a rock is Perrin's axe striking Veles, who hides underground. But this pursuit isn't destructive, it's cyclical. It's the storm that brings the rain, fertilizes the earth, which is the domain of Veles, and allows life and vegetation to re-emerge. It is the principle of constant renewal. Without the challenge of Veles, Perrin's order would stagnate. Without the thunder of Perrin, the chaos of Veles would consume the world. This tension is the pulse of the Slavic religion, and we will use it as our Ariadne's thread to navigate the labyrinth. To fully understand this dynamic, we've divided our journey into 4 major thematic blocks. First, we will delve into the cosmogony and the major pantheon, where we will break down how the world was born, how it is structured in its 3 levels Prav, Yav, and Nav, and introduce the architects of this cosmos, from Perrin and Veles to Svarog, the celestial blacksmith, and solar gods like Dazbog. Next, in the second part, we will explore the forces of destiny and the earth. Here, the mythology becomes more intimate and focuses on the feminine deities. We will meet Mokosh, the only goddess whose idol was honored alongside the great gods, the spinner of fate and mistress of moisture, and the powerful Mat Zemlya, moist Mother Earth, whose oath was the most sacred of all. We will also analyze the cycles of life through seasonal gods like Eurilo and Morana. Then, we will descend into the realm of the everyday and the dangerous, the soul of the territory, that is, the spirit. This is perhaps the most fascinating part and the one that has endured most in popular culture. We will leave the throne room of the gods to visit the kitchen, where the domovoi dwells, an old man who is the spirit of our first ancestor and guardian of the home. Then, we will venture into the forest, where we will get lost with the shape-shifting Leshy, the lord of the woods, and face the lethal seduction of the Rizalki in the rivers. Finally, the documentary culminates with the folklore of battle, magic, and death, where mythology is dressed in epic tales. We will meet the Bogaders, the legendary heroes like Ilya Muromets, whose valor defended the Chiv and Rus, and their fearsome adversaries, from the dragon Zmei Goranik to the ambiguous and terrifying figure of Baba Yaga, the guardian of the thresholds between the world of the living and the world of the dead. We close the circle by analyzing the Dvoevry, or double faith, and how this ancient cosmos continues to breathe today, not only in history books, but in art, music, and the resurgence of the old cult. The beginning isn't with light or with thunder, but with water. The Slavic myth of creation, unlike many others, doesn't arise from a void, but from a vast, dark, primordial sea. Before the sky existed, before time had a name, there was only ocean. And upon that ocean, floating in infinite solitude, were only 2 beings, God and his counterpart, the devil. It's crucial to understand that this dualistic narrative, although tainted by centuries of contact with Gnostic ideas and, above all, with Christianity, has very deep roots that predate the cross. The Slavs imagined God not as an omnipotent being who creates alone, but as an entity that coexists with his opposite, whom they often refer to simply as the evil one or, even more archaically, the duck. Yes, a duck. This myth, known as the Earth Diver myth, is common to many cultures of Eurasia. The story goes that God and the devil were companions, perhaps even brothers, gliding across this endless sea, bored with the uniformity. Finally, God takes the initiative to create the earth and asks his companion, the evil one or the duck, to dive into the depths of the primordial ocean to bring back the mud that will be used to form the world. The devil obeys, but being the trickster that he is, he tries to deceive God. Instead of bringing back just a pinch of mud, he hides some under his tongue, intending to create his own kingdom in secret. When he emerges to the surface and hands the mud to God, the portion destined for the world begins to grow and expand without limits. And at that very moment, the mud that the devil has hidden in his mouth also begins to swell and suffocate him. The evil one writhes, coughs, and spits out the remaining fragments of mud, which fall, forming the irregular regions of the world, the mountains, the swamps, the deserts, and all the inhospitable surfaces. While God molded the plains, the valleys, and the places fit for life, the devil, in attempting to deceive him, unintentionally created everything that is difficult and uneven. This simple story explains everything in the Slavic worldview. The world is inherently broken and disordered. It isn't the pure work of a single benevolent force, but the result of a reluctant negotiation between order and chaos, between what is flat and good and what is rough and dangerous. The mud, that fundamental element, comes from a single place, the primordial ocean, suggesting that God and the devil share the same source, the same ancestral essence, but their intentions are divergent. The world itself is, therefore, the first great manifestation of the eternal struggle between Purin and Veles, between the law of heaven and the anarchy of the earth. As the world solidified, a second, equally important concept of creation was born: the cosmic egg. This idea, often associated with fertility and rebirth, postulates that everything that exists, from the heavens to the underworld, was originally contained in a giant egg. In some traditions, the Creator God breaks this egg, and from its shell are born the celestial vaults, from the yolk, the sun and the moon, and from the white, the waters and the earth. This metaphor, perhaps even older, represents creation as an act of explosion and division that gives rise to the trinity of the Slavic world, which we will analyze next. Although the myths vary, one speaks of an earth-diving duck, and the other of a cosmic egg, both arrive at the same crucial conclusion. The Slavic world is a place of duality and tension, where there is no light without its shadow, nor a plane without its counterplane. If creation is the primordial act that founds reality, then the Slavic worldview is defined by its three-dimensional structure. It isn't enough for the earth to exist. The cosmos must have a well-defined architecture for the life and the law of the gods to make sense. This structure is called the triple world, and it's divided into three fundamental levels that were as important to the ancient Slav as the air they breathed: Prav, Yav, and Nav. Let's start with Yav, which literally means manifestation, or that which is revealed. It is our realm, the visible and palpable world that we experience. It's the land of humans, animals, forests, and rivers. It's where harvests are gathered, loves are lived, and wars are fought. Yav is the midpoint, the place where the influences of the other two worlds meet and clash. Here, the sun of Dazbog radiates heat, the thunder of Purin punishes perjury, and the domovoi watches over the home. If you look around you, if you feel the wood of your chair or the wind on your face, you are experiencing Yav. Above our world lies Prav, which translates as the rule, the law, or the truth. Prav is the upper realm, the domain of the supreme gods, especially Purin, the guardian of cosmic law. It is the sphere of absolute truth and the origin of the laws that govern the cosmos and human morality. Think of Prav as the master gear that makes the entire universe work. The gods don't just live there, they are the law. Prav dictates order, the cycle of the seasons, duty, and honor. In the ancient Chiv and Rus, to swear by Purin was to invoke the laws of Prav, and to break that oath meant attracting the divine punishment of thunder. It is a place of immutable order, the perfection of form. Finally, and perhaps the most intriguing sphere, we have Nav. Nav is the direct antonym of Yav. It means the unmanifested, the invisible, or, more commonly, the underworld. Nav is a dark, cold, and humid realm that lies beneath the earth and beyond the waters. But beware, this isn't a hell of eternal punishment in the Christian style. Nav is, instead, the realm of the ancestors, of the spirits, of the Navs who return. It is the sacred domain of Veles, the serpent god who shepherds the souls of the deceased through eternal meadows. In Nav reside the roots of magic, hidden knowledge, and wealth. When a Slav died, his soul didn't automatically ascend to heaven, but traveled to Nav, to the care of Veles, from where the ancestor could continue to influence the fortune of his family in Yav. The connection of Nav with the earth is so close that, metaphorically, Nav is the subsoil that feeds the roots of the trees and sustains life in Yav. The interconnection of these three worlds is constant and critical. the Slavs couldn't separate them. Their reality was a skein woven by the three. Man lives in Yav, seeks to follow the laws of Prav, and knows that his ancestors in Nav are watching. The way these three levels join together is a powerful image, the cosmic axis that traverses the totality of existence. An image that leads us directly to the concept of the world tree, which is the backbone of this three-dimensional worldview. It is through the understanding of Prav, Yav, and Nav that we understand why the shaman, or Folkv, wasn't just a priest, but a traveler who knew how to move between these three planes to negotiate fortune, health, and destiny. This understanding of the triple world, more than a simple map, is the operation manual of the Slavic universe. The question that arises immediately after defining the three worlds, Prav, Yav, and Nav, is, what unites them? What is the axis, the backbone that keeps this three-dimensional cosmos assembled? The answer isn't a mountain, but a living being, a pulsating organism known as the Morovo Derivo, the world tree. For the Slavs, this tree wasn't a simple metaphor, but a literal representation of the totality of existence. The cosmic axis that pierces the three levels of reality, allowing the flow of life, destiny, and power. Although it is often represented as an oak, the sacred tree par excellence, associated with Purin, sometimes it also appears as a birch, the tree of light and fertility, much loved by the peoples of the steppe. What's crucial isn't the species, but its tripartite structure. The crown of the Morovo Derivo extends vast and luminous toward the realm of Prav, the upper world. It's the domain of the sky and immutable law. Here, in the highest branches, sits Purin, the thunder god, who is often visualized as an eagle or a falcon guarding the order. It's also thought that the source of the celestial waters, of the rain that is fundamental for life, resides in these branches, reinforcing the idea that Prav isn't just abstract law, but also the provision of the essential conditions for survival. The supreme gods and the celestial bodies are anchored to this crown, being the observers and dictators of destiny. That is why, in the myths, the hero who desires divine knowledge must, metaphorically, ascend to the branches of the tree. The trunk of the tree traverses and defines Yav, the manifested world. This is the region where we humans find ourselves and where the drama of daily life unfolds. The trunk represents time, space, and the constant interaction between the forces from above and those from below. Hoofed animals, such as deer, horses, and cattle, which were the basis of Slavic wealth, are often associated with this level. It is the point of equilibrium. Without a strong trunk, the crown wouldn't reach the law of Prav, and the roots couldn't access the magic of Nav. The trunk not only supports the world, but it anchors it. In fact, the first temple of Purin in the Rus was erected next to a sacred oak, establishing a direct analog, a physical point of contact between the ritual trunk and the cosmic axis. Finally, the roots penetrate deeply into the fertile darkness of Nav, the underworld. Here, the tree is inverted, and the domain belongs to Veles. Veles isn't just the lord of the dead, but also a serpent god or dragon who wraps around the roots, guarding the source of wealth and all subterranean magic. The most powerful and recurrent myth of this cosmogony is the perpetual struggle. Purin pursues Veles, who hides from him. Veles takes refuge in the roots of this tree, in the water of Nav, and Purin strikes him with his lightning from the crown of Prav. It's the cycle of water. The storm that falls from the sky runs through the trunk of the earth and filters into the roots to feed Nav, ensuring that the cattle of Veles prosper and that the ancestors rest. The roots represent the primordial, the hidden, the source of fertility, and, paradoxically, the death that gives life. The Morovo Derivo, therefore, isn't just a static map. It is the narrative mechanism that explains the why of chaos and order. When Purin and Veles clash in the pursuit, they are causing the cosmic energy to flow through the tree, which, in turn, manifests in Yav as the change of the seasons, the passage from winter, the domain of Nav, to spring, the return of Prav. Thinking about this not only reminds us of the complexity of their faith, but also gives us the key to understanding why, even after Christianization, the Slavic peasant would never cut down an old tree without asking forgiveness. It wasn't just a tree, it was the anchoring point of their universe. If the Slavic cosmos has a beating heart, that heart belongs to Purin. He is the perfect embodiment of prav, order, and the central figure of the entire pre-Christian pantheon. So much so that even the Christian chroniclers recognized him as the most important god of the Chiv and Rus, the Slavic equivalent of Jupiter or Thor. Let's start with his name. The etymology of Purin is rich and tells us exactly who he is. It's believed that its root comes from the Proto-Slavic Purindrznagz, thus connected to the word for, to strike, or to impact. In other Indo-European languages, this root is linked to the concept of rock, thunder, or even a mountain, hence his immediate connection with the most impressive geological and atmospheric power. Purin is literally, he who strikes. His name is an echo of the thunder that announces his presence as thunder god and sovereign. The iconography of Purin is powerful and coherent. He was imagined as a mature, strong, and bearded man, often with copper-colored hair, a detail that links him to fire and lightning. His main weapon, and the most symbolic, isn't a spear, but a stone axe or a hammer. This axe has a mythical name and a dual function. It not only strikes, but, like a divine boomerang, it always returns to the hand of Purin. When lightning struck, the Slav didn't just see a meteorological phenomenon, they saw Purin throwing his axe to restore order or punish perjury. His chariot or cart, pulled by goats or sometimes by stallions, is the visible manifestation of the thunder that rumbles in the skies. When a storm approached, the Slavic imagination saw Purin traversing the clouds, a cinematic image that adds drama to daily life. But the most important thing about his iconography is his association with the oak, the strongest and longest-lived tree in the Slavic forest. The sacred oak was his earthly abode, a direct point of contact between Prav and Yav. The cult of Purin was the cult of state power, law, and war. In the ancient capital of Kiev, before the baptism, Prince Vladimir erected a great idol of Purin with a wooden body and a silver head, adorned with a golden mustache. The sacrifices were solemn. Bulls or sometimes roosters were immolated. Although chroniclers speak of darker offerings, such as prisoners of war, these rites weren't celebrated in closed temples, but in high places or in the heart of sacred groves. But beyond the sacrifices, the true social power of Purin resided in the oaths of war. When the Chiv and Rus signed a peace treaty or prepared for battle, the warriors swore by Purin and by Veles. To swear by Purin was to invoke the punishment of lightning if the word was broken. It was to put the law of Prav above one's own life. This was such an ingrained custom that the Slavs of the Rus, when swearing, sometimes struck their weapons or the ground, ritualizing the blow of their god's axe. His role wasn't just to thunder, but to guarantee social and military cohesion. In fact, history gives us a fascinating detail about how his cult was resisted when Prince Vladimir converted to Christianity in 988. The first order he gave was the destruction of the great idol of Purin. They had soldiers drag it, beat it with rods to dishonor it, and throw it into the Dnieper River. But the people of Kiev crowded the banks and wept for their god, shouting, "Purin, row to the shore!" A last cry of desperation that, certainly. Here's the expanded and creatively rewritten translation of the provided text into American English, adhering to the specified style. In Slavic hearts, the roots of their sovereignty ran deep. Even condemnation by the Church couldn't extinguish the ancient faith. As foretold, its might was such that the Orthodox Church had to find an equally potent substitute. Enter Saint Elijah, or Eli Prokas, a prophet akin to Peru, who thunders across the heavens in a fiery chariot, unleashing storms and hurling lightning bolts. And so, come summertime, the Slavic peasant would honor the Lord of Thunder, whether he called him Peru or Saint Elijah, proving that celestial laws and order are an innate human need, one the Church could not sever. Here lies the very core of Slavic mythology, the tale that explains it all, the eternal, necessary conflict between Peru, the celestial order, and Veles, the earthly chaos. This clash isn't merely an old story, but the fundamental mechanism that winds the clock of the cosmos, an endless chase guaranteeing the renewal of life in Jov, the manifest world. The central narrative follows a distinct pattern known in scholarly circles as the myth of the thunder god and his adversary. The tale usually begins with Voles committing an act of transgression. As the god of magic, cunning, and wealth, including cattle, Voles ascends from the underworld of Nav to the land of Jov, stealing something belonging to Peru. What is stolen? The variations are intriguing. Sometimes, it's Peru's cattle, symbolizing earthly wealth and prosperity. At other times, it's Peru's wife or one of his children, signifying the abduction of fertility or the celestial waters. Voles, the trickster, uses his shape-shifting abilities, transforming into a serpent, a dragon, or even a woolly animal, a transformation suggested by the etymology of his name, and hides somewhere on Earth. Where does he hide? He always seeks refuge in damp, low places, the roots of the world tree, beneath a rock, in a swamp, or within a fallen log, his own realm of NAF. Peru, from the crown of the world tree in PAF, detects him. Enraged by the offense and determined to restore order, the thunder god begins his pursuit with his stone axe and lightning arrows. Peru's chase manifests in Jov as a storm. The lightning we see isn't random. It's Peru's projectiles attempting to strike Voles. The thunder is the roar of his chariot tearing through the skies. If you're still watching at this point, please hit that subscribe button. I'm the Night Historian, and my greatest aspiration is to cultivate a huge community of night owls and knowledge seekers. Thousands of people from around the world connected by the intrinsic desire to know more, to better understand themselves, and to lead richer lives. I always emphasize that knowing history is crucial to avoiding the mistakes of the past. So, please take a moment to subscribe and share this video with your knowledge-loving friends. And, if you're feeling generous, consider sending a super thanks to yours truly. In any case, my gratitude is boundless simply for sharing this moment with me. Now back to the story. When the lightning finally strikes Voles' hiding place, chaos is temporarily defeated, not destroyed. The stolen property, the cattle or the water, is liberated. If it was cattle, their release manifests as rain, fertilizing the earth that belongs to Voles. If it was water, the storm subsides and order is restored. At that moment, Voles, humbled and defeated, retreats to his subterranean kingdom, promising or preparing to ascend again and steal anew. The symbolism of this conflict is profound and crucial to Slavic life. This struggle isn't about good versus evil, it's order versus chaos, dry versus wet, sky versus earth. This dynamic drives the cycle of storms and agricultural renewal. Drought and winter were seen as the temporary triumph of Voles, who had concealed the waters of life. The arrival of spring and summer storms was the triumph of Peru, who forced Voles to release those waters. This eternal conflict ensures that the earth remains fertile and that life can continue in Jov. One cannot exist without the other. It is this duality, this yin and yang, that makes their mythology so rich. On one hand, Peru demands sacrifices and oaths of war. On the other, Voles is the patron of poets, bards, magic, and the marketplace. The warrior swore by Peru, the shepherd swore by Voles. The Slavic people honored both, knowing that one brought law and protection, and the other brought wealth, knowledge, and the sustenance of the ancestors. This conflict isn't a war but a cosmic dance that makes the manifested world possible. If Peru is the great general who imposes law, then Sverige is the silent architect who created that law. Sverige is known as the celestial blacksmith or, in older traditions, the father of the gods. His figure is one of the oldest and least detailed in the chronicles, often indicating a deity so primordial that he had already been surpassed by more dynamic figures like Peru by the time the myths were recorded. Sverige is the Slavic equivalent of the Greek god Uranus, the sky itself, or perhaps the Roman Vulcan, though with a nuance. His name, likely meaning heaven or bright, intrinsically links him to the firmament. In Slavic myth, Sverige initiates the Golden Age. His primary role isn't to thunder or pursue but to legislate and bring civilization. Legend has it that Sverige established the first rules for humanity at the beginning of time. But his most crucial act, his supreme gift, was giving fire to humans. One tradition narrates that Sverige not only created the sky but also retired, leaving the governance of the cosmos to his children, granting him a position as a deus ociosus, a creator god who withdraws from daily drama. Before doing so, he opened the heavens and cast down fire, the essential tool for progress. This celestial fire not only served to warm homes and cook food, but was also the key to metallurgy. By giving fire, Sverige gave the knowledge of blacksmithing, and by giving blacksmithing, he gave the ability to make weapons, tools, and, crucially, to forge the first laws. In fact, Sverige is credited with inventing the first legal code, which was passed down orally and often visualized as forging the chains of destiny or covenants. Blacksmithing, therefore, is not just a craft, it's a sacred act that imitates divine creation and maintains social order. Now, although Sverige is the father, his energies continue to manifest vitally in daily life through his children. The most important of these is Svarishik, which literally means little Sverige or son of Sverige. Svarishik is the personification of the visible sun. This establishes a fascinating solar genealogy. The primordial, celestial fire, Sverige, begets the sun that shines daily, Svarishik. Svarishik is the sun that brings heat, fertility, and light. A young and radiant god whose journey through the sky guarantees that the cycle of life will continue. His cult was deeply rooted in the winter solstice, a time when the rebirth of the sun was celebrated, ensuring that darkness wouldn't win the battle. This concept helps us understand the complexity of the Slavic pantheon, which isn't limited to a single sun god. Sverige represents the concept of the burning sky and creative fire, while Svarishik is the manifestation of that fire as the daily star. Later, the Slavs would give a more developed personality to another solar god, Dazbog, whom the chronicles sometimes identify as Svarishik himself. This fluidity between names and roles simply underscores a truth. For the Slav, fire, whether in the sky, in the forge, or in the home, was the most sacred manifestation of Sverige's creative principle, a power so fundamental that it was attributed as the origin of law and the father of light. Within the complexity of the Slavic pantheon, Dazbog is the figure who embodies sunlight in its most vital and beneficial function. While Sverige is the primordial father of celestial fire, and Svarishik is the visible sun, Dazbog becomes the most important solar figure for the common Slav. His name is the key to his function. Dazbog is often translated as the god who gives or giver of goods. He is the sun in its fertilizing and generous aspect, the giver of material wealth, fortune, and the warmth necessary for life in Jov. In many chronicles, Dazbog is presented as the son of the sun and, by extension, the son of Sverige. His cult was vital in Slavic agricultural societies because he provided not only light but also the energy necessary for crop growth. His presence was synonymous with prosperity and good fortune. He was associated with gold and silver, not only as precious metals but as metaphors for his brilliance and his power to enrich the earth. For the Slav, Dazbog was as essential as the law, as survival depended directly on his benevolence. In fact, in some texts, Dazbog is even equated with the concept of Svarishik, demonstrating how solar roles merged into a single powerful and central deity. The narrative of his daily journey through the sky is one of the most poetic in mythology. Dazbog traverses the celestial vault in a chariot pulled by magnificent white horses or sometimes by swans. His chariot is so bright that he needs a protective cloak or shield to prevent it from burning the earth as he passes. This journey, which occurs from sunrise to sunset, is not just a natural phenomenon. It's the guarantee that Peru's order is maintained and that Jov remains a habitable place. When the sun sets, the story doesn't end. It was believed that during the night, Dazbog didn't rest but continued his journey through the underworld of Nav, the realm of Voles. This nocturnal journey was fundamental because it allowed him to interact with the ancestors and the source of magic. By completing his subterranean journey, Dazbog ensured that the next morning he could be reborn in the east, carrying with him not only light but also the knowledge and blessings he had acquired from the dead. This cycle of death and daily rebirth underscores the connection between life and the underworld and demonstrates how even the celestial gods depend on Vales's domain to complete their work. In the context of law, Dazbog was not a strict legislator like Peru but the god who granted rights and fortune. The Slavs saw themselves not only as worshippers but as grandchildren of Dazbog. This familial connection was not just an honor. It was an affirmation of their right to the land, to prosperity, and to a favored position in the cosmos. This deep connection with the giver of goods underscores that, for the Slavs, the origin of their nation and their well-being came directly from the light that radiates life and wealth. In a cosmos ruled by thunder and earth, the figure of Strybog dominates the atmospheric skies. Strybog is the god of the wind, storms, and dispersion. His power is fundamental, as he gives movement and breath to nature. But his nature is inconstant and often capricious. He's imagined as an old man with a face weathered by the elements, a white beard, and a bag or horn from which he releases gusts of air. Strybog's name is related to the Proto-Slavic root meaning God. Some scholars theorize that, like Sverige, Strybog might have been a deity of great antiquity, perhaps a sky god predating or parallel to Peru, although in later chronicles his domain was restricted to the aerial forces. He is the incarnation of the cosmic breath, the one who moves the clouds so that Peru can unleash his storms, or the one who disperses Vales's fog. The most famous characteristic of this god is his offspring, the grandchildren of Strybog. In epic poems and balinas, these grandchildren are the personifications of the winds in their different forms and directions. The cold and biting north wind, the west wind that brings rain, the warm south wind, and the east wind that often brings change. These grandchildren are not just mythological figures, they are active agents of destiny. They are often represented as warriors or turbulent spirits, and it is through them that Strybog exerts his direct influence on the world of Jov. The most feared ability of Strybog's grandchildren is their power to initiate battles and bring destruction. In the epic The Tale of Igor's Campaign, one of the few literary sources that gives us a glimpse into the pagan mythology that still persisted in the 11th century, the winds that blow before a catastrophic confrontation are described directly as the grandchildren of Strybog, scattering the arrows of the enemies over the battlefields. They not only disperse weapons but also act as the manifestation of misfortune and discord, raising the dust and chaos that precedes the massacre. Wind, therefore, is not neutral. It is a factor in war, a force that can decide the outcome of a conflict by dispersing formations or carrying disease. The cult of Strybog was, therefore, an act of appeasement. The Slavs sought to ingratiate themselves with him to ensure favorable winds for navigation, to disperse plagues, or to prevent tempests from destroying the roofs of their homes. Millers and hunters were especially devoted to him, as they depended directly on the winds for their trades. In the grand cosmic hierarchy, Strybog occupies an intermediate space. He is part of the sky, but his action is felt immediately and palpably on the earth. His power of dispersion is a fascinating duality. He can scatter the seeds for the harvest, bringing life, or he can scatter ruin and war, bringing death. Like many Slavic deities, he reminds us that the forces of nature are as powerful as they are ambiguous, capable of building and destroying with equal ease. The figure of Koros, or George, is perhaps the most enigmatic and debated within the Slavic pantheon, particularly among the gods who have a connection with light. Unlike Dazbog, whose function as the radiant sun and giver of goods is clear, the role of Koros is murky and has provoked intense academic controversy for over a century. The main debate revolves around whether Koros represents the moon or whether he is a less benevolent or older solar aspect. The main source of information about Koros is the Primary Chronicle, which mentions his idol alongside those of Peru, Dazbog, Strybog, Mokosh, and Samargal, in the pantheon established by Prince Vladimir in Kiev before Christianization. The strongest theory that connects him with the moon posits that the name Koros derives from the Persian or Iranian word kors or fur, meaning sun. Although it seems contradictory, In certain Slavic traditions influenced by Iranian tribes such as the Alans or Sarmatians, the original term for the sun might have been reassigned to the moon or a secondary celestial body after the appearance of Dazbog as the main solar deity. In other words, when Dazbog consolidated as the sun, the term Koros slipped toward the moon, the light of the night. In the already mentioned, The Tale of Igor's Campaign, Koros appears in a phrase interpreted as the nocturnal journey of a prince. If Dazbog travels in the morning, the appearance of Koros in a nocturnal sequence suggests that he is the sun that shines below the horizon or, more plainly, the light that governs the night. Another school of thought argues that Koros is, in fact, a solar deity but that he represents a different, or perhaps more archaic, facet of that power, the sun of winter, the less benevolent sun. This vision links him with the sun in its winter or weaker aspect. Unlike Dazbog, the sun that fertilizes, Koros would be the sun that barely warms, the one that struggles to cross the firmament and the one that foreshadows cold and scarcity. His cult might have focused on the winter solstice, in ceremonies to urge the sun to return with all its strength. It's also suggested that Koros was the solar deity of a specific Slavic tribe, and that his inclusion in the pantheon of Kiev was a political act to unify the tribes, but his domain always remained secondary or less universal than that of Dazbog. That is, two gods of the sun coexisted in an act of early syncretism. The truth is that, due to the scarcity of primary pagan sources, remember that most of what we know comes from hostile Christian chronicles. The precise function of Koros remains an open mystery. What we can affirm with certainty is his role in the context of the pantheon. The existence of Koros demonstrates that Slavic cosmogony operated with a stratified complexity around the concept of light. If Dazbog is the sun of the day, visible wealth, and the heat of life, Koros, whether as the moon or as the winter sun, represents the hidden light, the energy that moves through the realm of Nav during the night or the hope that the stronger light will return. His presence compelled the Slav to recognize that light was not monolithic but a force that changes and conceals itself, a detail that adds depth to this ancient cosmos. Moving from the masculine war and thunder of the sky to the feminine fecundity and magic of the earth, we find Mokosh, or Mokos, a figure of immense importance. Her name, which probably translates as wet or moist, related to the Slavic root for humidity or soaking, reveals her essential domain. Mokosh is the goddess of water, moisture, fertility, and the moist earth that gives life. Her importance is such that, as mentioned in the chronicle, Mokosh has the honor of being the only female deity whose idol was included by Prince Vladimir in the state pantheon of Kiev in 980, before his conversion to Christianity. This was no simple detail. It was a political and religious recognition that the feminine half of the cosmos, the power of the earth and motherhood, was indispensable for the legitimacy of the state. If Peru was the patron of warriors and nobility, Mokosh was the patron of the common people, of women and agriculture. Mokosh's control over moisture is her primary function. She rules the dews, the fine rain, and the moisture of the soil, all critical elements for a successful harvest. This made her the protector of childbirth and motherhood, as water and blood are intrinsically linked to giving birth. Pregnant women and midwives offered her oaths and offerings, asking for her blessing for a safe birth. But Mokosh's domain transcends agriculture and the body. Her other great role connects her with destiny and domestic magic. Mokosh spun and weaved, and this is a detail that we cannot overlook. The act of spinning wool or linen was the primary work of Slavic women, especially during the long and dark winters. In mythology, this act becomes a profound metaphor. The thread is destiny. Mokosh and her celestial helpers, the Ra-Denis, deities of birth and luck, spin the threads of human life. Cutting the thread meant ending life. Weaving it beautifully meant ensuring good fortune. This connection with spinning explains why the Orthodox Church, once established, had to work hard to suppress her cult. Women often left skeins of wool or linen as offerings near wells or in their homes, and there was a strict prohibition on spinning on Fridays, as Friday was Mokosh's sacred day. Even after centuries of Christianization, The name of Mokosh and her sacred day merged with the cult of Saint Paraskiva Pyatnitsa, Friday. A martyred saint, but whose name and attributes, patron of spinning, destiny, and fertility, made her a perfect syncretism of the ancient pagan goddess. In essence, Mokosh was the force that ensured that the magic of the cosmos continued in the home. She was the woman's link with the great moist Mother Earth, ensuring that the cycle of life was not only completed in the field but woven safely under the roof of each family. She is proof that feminine power, although often ignored by masculine military chronicles, was the spiritual backbone of Slavic civilization. If Mokosh is the moisture of the soil and the weaver of destiny, then Matsyra Zemlya, which translates as moist Mother Earth, is the fundamental feminine deity, the primordial force of nature. She is not just a goddess in the pantheon, she is the living earth itself, a sacred being that is experienced underfoot, and that is the foundation of all existence in Jov. Her name is supremely evocative. The inclusion of moist is an essential trait, as it underscores that land without water is sterile, dead. Only moist earth, fertilized by the celestial water of Peru or the moisture of Mokosh, can give life. She is the tireless provider. From her body spring crops, flowers, and animals. She not only nourishes, she is life. This conception of the earth as a living and conscious mother had direct ramifications in Slavic customs and laws, especially in the practice of oaths. A Slav who wanted to ensure the absolute truth of his word did not swear only by Peru but performed the oath of the earth. The oath consisted of touching the earth, eating a bit of it, or covering his head with a handful of earth while pronouncing the promise. By invoking moist Mother Earth, the oath acquired an unbreakable force. Breaking an oath made to her, Matsur Assemblia didn't simply signify the fury of thunder, it implied something far more profound and intimate. It meant that the very earth would deny its bounty to the perjurer. They would be cursed with infertility, disease, and ultimately their lifeless body would be rejected by the soil itself. Their oath was the most powerful and respected guarantee of truth. This almost physical reverence for the earth led to a strict prohibition against harming it during certain sacred times of the year. A concept that illustrates the profound reverence with which this deity was treated. In early spring, during the days leading up to planting, and especially on the day of the Holy Spirit, Pentecost, the earth was believed to be pregnant and sleeping. During this time, plowing, digging, or driving stakes into the ground was strictly forbidden. Doing so was considered an act of aggression, akin to harming a pregnant woman. It was believed to provoke the wrath of Mother Earth, resulting in failed harvests or disasters. The Slavic peasant, whose life depended entirely on the earth's generosity, would never begin planting without first speaking to the earth, asking permission, and apologizing for the necessity of wounding it with the plow to sustain themselves. Even after Christianization, the cult of Mother Earth persisted with incredible force. Though the Church elevated the figure of the Virgin Mary, Matsyra Sima was not replaced but assimilated. Many pagan rituals dedicated to the earth continued to be celebrated in secret or disguised with new Christian names, because the idea that the earth is a living, sentient, and life-giving being was too fundamental to be eradicated. The moist Mother Earth is the constant reminder that without the soil that sustains us and the moisture that fecundates us, the Slavic cosmos is nothing. Within the Slavic pantheon, where agrarian cycles and the climate dictated life, Urilo, or his feminine form, Urila, is the god who embodies the unstoppable force of spring, youthful passion, and overflowing sexuality that bursts forth after the long dormancy of winter. He is an essentially seasonal deity, whose power is fleeting but vital. His name is connected to the Proto-Slavic root yar, meaning vigorous, ardent, zealous, or fierce. Urilo is not the benevolent and mature light of Dazbog, but the wild, explosive fury that breaks the ice and makes vegetation sprout with an almost violent energy. He is represented as a young, fair-haired god dressed in white, often crowned with a bouquet of spring flowers or a garland of grain ears, and riding a white horse. He is the awakening of nature, sexual desire, and unrestrained fertility. His cult was concentrated on the transition from winter to spring, the time when life returns to Jove. He was the central figure of grand fertility festivals celebrated in what would today be the month of May. These celebrations were filled with rites to ensure an abundant harvest and high birth rate. The appearance of Eurylo, symbolized by a young man adorned with the flowers of the season, marked the opening of the earth for love, planting, and life. His energy was so intense and chaotic that if allowed to remain, his passion would burn the earth instead of fertilizing it. For this reason, the culmination of his cult involved a ritual of symbolic sacrifice to invoke the arrival of summer. The rites varied by region, but the idea was the same. The god of passion had to die or be buried so that the controlled and stable phase of summer could begin. This was a moment of great ritualistic drama, the burial of Eurylo. In some villages, an effigy of the god was created from straw or wood. After a day of songs, erotic dances, and fertility games, the effigy was dressed, celebrated, and finally, symbolically buried in the field or thrown into the river. The burning or dismantling. In other places, the figure of Eurylo was burned or dismembered, and its remains were scattered across the fields. This sacrifice was not an act of sorrow, but a transfer of power. By killing or burying Eurylo, his fertilizing force was released into the earth, ensuring that the sexual potency and vigor of spring would be transformed into the material sustenance of summer and autumn. This ritual marks the transition from the explosive chaos of spring to the productive order of the warm season. Eurylo represents the fundamental idea that for life to continue, there must be cyclical sacrifice. The indomitable passion must give way to the need for maturity. He is a figure of great beauty and danger, a god as necessary for the beginning of life as potentially destructive if allowed to remain too long. His brief but intense reign is the engine of Slavic agrarian renewal. In the perpetual cycle of Slavic nature, if Eurylo represents the explosion of life in spring, then Kolyada is the personification of the rebirth of light at the darkest point of the year. Kolyada is the spirit of winter and the solstice, and his figure is intrinsically linked to the celebration of the solar new year. The name Kolyada has deep roots, possibly deriving from Latin colendi, marking the first part of the month, or more directly, from the Slavic word for the solstice holiday. He was not just a god, but an entire festival encompassing the transition between the old winter and the new sun. This celebration occurred around the winter solstice, the day when the night is longest, and the sun, after reaching its lowest point, begins its journey back, promising longer days and the eventual end of the cold. The essence of Kolyada is alive in the Kolyada songs, which are the Slavic equivalent of Western carols. During these holidays, groups of young people known as kolyadniki went from house to house singing these songs. These were not simply cheerful melodies, they were ritual incantations designed to ensure the fortune and fertility of the family that received them. The lyrics often narrated the birth of the sun, the agrarian cycle, and asked for blessings, good harvest, and prosperity for the livestock. In exchange for their ritual songs, the kolyadniki received gifts, food, or money. A practice of exchange that reaffirmed community cohesion during the rigors of winter. The celebration of Kolyada not only marked the beginning of the new solar year, but also the symbolic return of the sun, an early manifestation of Dasbog or Svarashik. The night of the solstice was a time of divination when the veil between Jove and Nav was thin, and it was customary to perform rituals to predict luck in the coming year, especially the fate of young maidens. This ritual filled with noise, costumes, and songs was a way to combat the oppressive darkness and fear of winter, affirming with a bang the inevitable victory of light. The tradition of Kolyada was so powerful that, like many other pagan holidays, it was syncretized by Christianity, merging and giving rise to the celebration of Orthodox Christmas and New Year, demonstrating the tenacity of the spirit that, before the arrival of the new sun, in the opposite corner of the seasonal cycle of Eurylo and Kolyada, we find Morana, or Mara, the goddess who embodies death, ice, and winter stasis. She is the antithesis of life, the incarnation of disease, old age, and the cold that paralyzes nature. Her name is directly linked to the Indo-European root meaning to die. Morana is the sovereign of winter, the period when the moist earth sleeps under a layer of ice, and Jov more closely resembles the coldness of Nav. She is a terrible and feared figure, often described as a pale and ugly woman, dressed in black robes or made entirely of ice, whose mere breath brings frost and disease. She is a manifestation of the chaos and disorder that winter imposes, a time when the world of Purin is silenced by the temporary dominion of the cold. Morana's role in Slavic life was to be the receptacle of everything that had to be discarded: disease, hunger, and winter. For this reason, the arrival of spring was not just a celebration of Yarilo, but a ritual of aggressive expulsion of Morana. This ritual became the central act of Maslenitsa, the week-long festival that precedes the Great Orthodox Lent and is today synonymous with eating butter pancake. The ritual of expulsion. The climax of Maslenitsa was the creation of an effigy of Morana made of straw and dressed in women's clothing. This effigy was paraded through the village, and then in a ceremony filled with shouts, laughter, and sometimes ritual violence, it was burned, torn apart, or thrown into the water. The act symbolized the defeat of death and winter and the imminent arrival of the fertility of spring. By burning Morana, the Slav not only got rid of the deity of cold, but performed a ritual purification of the village, expelling the misfortunes, diseases, and evils accumulated during the winter. It is a powerful allegory of the end of winter. Life symbolized by the Maslenitsa festival's triumphs over death and ice. Morana, both Kolyada and Morana are two sides of the same seasonal coin. Kolyada attracts the promise of light and rebirth, while Morana is the harsh reality of winter stagnation. The need to honor the return of one and expel the other articulated the slave year, ensuring that the people were in tune with the relentless and powerful cycles of Jov. If Purin is the sky and the law, then Veles is his necessary counterpart, the earth, magic, and hidden knowledge. Veles is undoubtedly the most complex and multifaceted figure in the Slavic pantheon. A god who refuses to be pigeonholed as purely evil, despite his role as Purin's main cosmic antagonist. Veles's domain is the underworld. Nav, the realm of the unmanifested. He is the lord of the roots of the world tree. Veles is visualized as the guardian of the dead, the one who shepherds the souls of the deceased through green and moist meadows. This is not a hell of torment, but a place of ancestral rest. The Slavs believed that Veles not only guarded these souls, but was also the provider of fertility and moisture that arose from the subsoil. This moisture, by rising, ensures that the fields of Jov remain green. For this reason, his presence was felt intensely at the end of autumn, when the earth opened to receive the dead and vegetation died. His etymology reinforces his complex nature. The name Veles has several academic interpretations. It could derive from the root velu, meaning not, directly linking him to his role as patron of livestock, the main wealth of an agrarian people. Livestock is the wealth that emanates from the earth, so this meaning intrinsically connects him to the terrestrial and subterranean world. Another possible root connects him with Belesti or Bel, meaning prophetic or to deceive, which underscores his dominion over magic, hidden knowledge, and cunning. Veles's patronage extended far beyond livestock and the dead. He was the patron of wealth, but not of wealth that falls from the sky as a blessing from Dazbog, but of wealth that is obtained through trade, exchange, and sometimes deception. This association made him the god of mercantile oaths. When the Slavs signed treaties with the Byzantines, the warriors swore by Purin, the law and the destruction of the weapon, and the merchants swore by Veles, wealth and livestock. Breaking the oath to Veles meant the loss of all fortune and livestock. Even more fascinating is his connection with poetry. Veles was the patron of bards and ballad singers, those who narrated the epics and stories of the people. The tale of Igor's campaign refers to the legendary bard Boyan as a grandson of Veles. This is because poetry, music, and storytelling are forms of verbal magic, of knowledge that is not logical or written, but inspired and ancestral, qualities that reside in the realm of Nav. His function as Purin's cosmic opponent is what gives him his transcendence. As we have already explored, the conflict between the serpent-dragon god Veles, who hides in the roots of Nav, and the eagle-thunder god Purin, who attacks from the treetop. Jov is the driving force of the universe. This duality is what maintains the cycle of water, fertility, and life. Purin's pursuit forces Veles to release what was stolen, the water or the livestock, and the release manifests as the rain that nourishes the earth. The figure of Veles was so omnipresent that his cult was the most difficult to eradicate for the new faith. Just as Purin found his echo in Saint Elijah, Veles was syncretized in Saint Blaise. In Div Saint Blaise is the Christian saint venerated in the East as the patron of livestock and animals. A direct substitution that allowed the slave to continue honoring the Lord of the flocks, albeit with a different name, demonstrating Veles's immutable power over the earth and the fate of his people. Leaving the great gods of thunder and the sun, we descend to the most critical and persistent sphere of Slavic belief, domestic magic in the heart of every home. Of each izba, the traditional Slavic house, there is no golden idol, but a silent spirit known as the domovoi, the guardian of the house. The domovoi is fundamentally the spirit of domestic magic and family stability. Its origin is one of the most touching details of mythology. The domovoi is believed to be the spirit of the first ancestor who built the house, or the spirit of an ancestor who, upon dying, decided to stay to watch over his lineage. This grants him unquestionable moral authority. He is the direct link with the founders of the family, which obliges their descendants to honor traditions and maintain order. His presence turns the house not only into a refuge, but into an ancestral sanctuary that exists on the border between Jov and Nav. The appearance of the domovoi is as intimate as its function. It has no fixed and known form, which increases its mystery and proximity. It is often described as a small, gray-haired, hairy old man who hides behind the stove, under the chimney, or on the threshold. It is essentially a being invisible to adults, although children and animals can perceive it. However, its most common manifestation is to take the form of the owner of the house, especially when he is absent or when some crucial event is approaching. If you see a flash of a familiar figure moving around the house only with the corner of your eye, it is probably the domovoi. And a curious fact that adds a touch of black humor to folklore. If the domovoi suffocates you during sleep, the phenomenon we now call sleep paralysis, it is customary to ask, is it for good or for bad? His silence or his incomprehensible answer will predict the fortune of the year. The domovoi is not a deity to be prayed to, but a relative to be honored. It is a volatile being capable of giving luck or unleashing chaos. If the family is hard-working, respectful, and keeps the house clean, the domovoi is benevolent, will braid the manes of the horses, scare away mice, and ensure fortune. But if the family is lazy or messy, he gets irritated. His anger manifests in nighttime noises, things that disappear, or worse, in the illness of the livestock or the general discomfort of the family. Rituals to appease him were crucial. Every night, especially before holidays, an offering of bread, salt, or a bowl of fresh milk was left next to the stove or in the warmest corner of the house. They were simple but symbolically charged offerings. But the most important ritual related to the domovoi occurred during the move. A family could not simply leave their guardian behind. Abandoning the domovoi meant inviting bad luck. Therefore, the moving ritual was an act of supplication and persuasion. An old shoe or shovel was taken, left in the center of the house, and the head of the family invited him with reverence, saying, "Domovoi, domovoi, come home with us." A fire was lit in the old chimney, and embers were placed in a vessel, saying, "Grandfather, come. Your new home awaits you." Only if the domovoi accepted the transfer would the new house be blessed. Otherwise, bad luck would follow because the magical essence of his new home would have been emptied. The domovoi is living proof that for the Slav, magic was not something remote that occurred in the sky, but a tangible and personal presence that was felt in the warmth of the home, a constant reminder that the ancestors are the true guardians of family well-being. In addition to the imposing domovoi, the Slavic home was inhabited by a series of female spirits and other minor guardians who reflected the magic and dangers of domestic life and its surroundings. The kikimora is one of the most disturbing and least benevolent figures of Slavic domestic magic, often classified as a night demon or a spirit of ill omen. Unlike the domovoi, who can be good or bad depending on family conduct, the kikimora is generally malevolent and is specifically associated with laziness and disorder. The kikimora has a double origin. Sometimes she is considered the spirit of a woman who died unnaturally, such as an abandoned bride or an unbaptized girl, and on other occasions, she is imagined as an evil spirit sent by a sorcerer to torment a house. She is very thin, small, and with a tiny head, but her existence is felt in the air. Her favorite habitat is the space behind the stove, the pantry, or crucially the spinning area. Connection with spinning. The kikimora is obsessed with spinning and weaving, the domain of the goddess Mokash and the primordial work of the women of the house. If a woman is lazy and leaves her spinning wheel or wool unguarded at night, the kikimora sits down to spin. The problem is that her spinning is disastrous. She tangles the threads, breaks the linen, and makes annoying noises. Her nocturnal activity is a ritual punishment against negligence. The sound of her spinning wheel in the darkness was the way in which folklore reinforced female industriousness, sleep paralysis. The most feared act of the kikimora is her connection with sleep paralysis. When she manifests, she often does so during the night, sitting on the chest of the sleeping person, crushing them, and stealing their breath. In this state of terror and paralysis, the victim knows they are awake but cannot move. This act is not random. It is interpreted as an omen of disgrace, illness, or even the imminent death of a family member. If a kikimora settled in a house, the only remedy was the purification of a folk, shaman, or the relocation of the stove, as the stove was considered her gateway. The dvorovoi is a protective spirit, the brother or relative of the domovoi, but his dominion extends beyond the walls of the house, ruling the yard, the barn, and above all, the domestic animals. His name literally means of the court or of the yard. Unlike the domovoi, who cares about family morals, the dvorovoi's main task is the health and well-being of the animals, especially horses and cattle. He is the one who must be appeased if you want to succeed in raising livestock. His appearance is similar to that of the domovoi, that of a small, hairy old man. But he is often seen in the form of one of the animals in the yard. Relationship with animals. The dvorovoi has very specific tastes, especially for horses of a certain color. If he likes a horse, he will carefully braid its mane, give it extra fodder, and protect it from disease. However, if a dvorovoi detests the color or character of an animal, he can become incredibly destructive. He will cut its hair, make it thin, and may even guide predators towards it. Rituals of appeasement. To ensure that the dvorovoi accepts a new animal, it was customary to perform small welcome rituals, such as smearing a new horse with lard. The place where the offerings were left, bread, milk, or colored ribbons, was the stable or the barn, not the chimney. His role was a daily reminder that the economic well-being of the family, tied to their animals, depended not only on labor, but on constant negotiation with the invisible forces of the territory. As we venture out of the warmth of the home, the domovoi's domain, we enter the sphere of natural spirits, and the most powerful of all is the Leshy, the lord and guardian of the forest. For the Slav, the forest was not simply a collection of trees, it was a vast, dark, and sacred realm, and the Leshy was its supreme authority. The Leshy is a figure of inconstant power, a being that embodies the wild and ever-changing nature of the forest. One of his most fascinating characteristics is his mutable nature and his ability to alter his shape and size at will. When he is near the treetops, protecting the boundaries of his domain, he can be as tall as the largest pine tree. However, when he moves along the ground, in the undergrowth, he can shrink to be as small and hunched as a mushroom. His appearance is also a walking camouflage. His skin is rough like bark. His eyes glow like burning embers, and his clothes are made of leaves and moss. He is often described as having no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and wearing footwear backwards, or with his hair and beard green on his side, signs that indicate his non-humanity. The Leshy has absolute control over the forest. He can make the birds sing or keep silent. He can guide the animals and most feared. He can disorient travelers, making them walk in circles until hunger and exhaustion overcome them. When a traveler realizes that he has been a victim of his magic and is being led astray, Slavic folklore offers a proven method to break the spell of lies. The trick is based on reversing the order of things. Imitating the spirit's own nature, the traveler must turn his clothes inside out, his shirt, jacket, or even his pants. He must also switch his shoes from foot to foot, the left on the right and vice versa. On occasions, the traveler is instructed to utter an oath or curse against the leshy or even the forest itself is a dangerous game. This act of inverting the natural order is a ritual reversal, meant to confuse the leshy. Since the spirit is a creature of this inverted order, often depicted with his footwear on the wrong feet, the human becomes his opposite, breaking the spell and regaining their sense of direction, finding their way back home. The leshy's authority over the forest extends to all its creatures, but his relationship with wolves is especially profound. He is the shepherd of the forest's animals, and the wolves are his personal hounds and guards, extensions of his will. Only the leshy can control them, and he is responsible for their numbers and movement. He can gather them into a large pack or disperse them as needed. When winter is particularly harsh, it is believed that the leshy grants his wolves permission to venture beyond the forest's borders and hunt the livestock of nearby villages. In this way, the leshy exerts control over the ecological balance of the territory, and his will is made manifest in the presence or absence of these fierce predators. In short, the leshy is the embodiment of untamed nature, the wild heart of the wood. His cult was not based on worship but on cautious respect and appeasement. To survive in the wilderness, the Slav did not need to befriend the leshy, only to know how to behave in his kingdom and, if necessary, how to outsmart him to escape his tricks. If the forest has the leshy, the waters have the Bodianoi, or Vodianoi, the dreaded old man of the river. He is the spirit of the still, deep waters, lakes, swamps, and especially watermills. The Bodianoi embodies danger, treachery, and the indomitable force of the aquatic elements, especially those that can drown or drag down the unwary. His appearance is as repulsive as his nature. He is described as a grotesque, fat, and green old man, his face swollen with water and a long, tangled beard of algae and silt. His eyes are red like the embers of a dying stove, his limbs are webbed, and he often sits on a log or stone in the middle of the river, a silent sentinel of the depths. This being spends most of his time at the bottom of rivers, where he maintains a palace made of crystal and shells, a testament to his power over the submerged world. The Vodianoi is not a benevolent spirit. His primary purpose is to drown human beings, especially those who venture recklessly into his domain after nightfall or during holidays. He drags victims to his palace, transforming them into his slaves or playthings, mere trinkets in his underwater kingdom. The Bodianoi had a particularly strong and terrifying connection with millers. The mills, being built directly on the river to harness its power, were seen as a constant and unavoidable point of contact with the spirit. It was believed that each mill belonged to the Bodiaoi, and the miller who worked there was seen as his servant, even his accomplice, bound by an unspoken contract with the water spirit. Superstition dictated that to prevent the Bodianoi from breaking the mill wheel, flooding the dam, or, worse, taking the miller or his family, the spirit had to be constantly appeased. Therefore, the miller was the practitioner of a silent and perpetual cult to appease the Bodianoi. Sacrifices were an indispensable rite. These were not just offerings of food but true negotiations with death, offerings of animals. The most common sacrifice was to throw a black animal into the waters, often a dog, cat, or duck, believing that this new life would appease the spirit's thirst for blood, a grim transaction to maintain the delicate balance. More symbolic offerings were also cast, such as bread, salt, tobacco, or, most curiously, an old horse that was ritually drowned in the river as an annual gift for the Bodianoi. The miller who neglected his duties was viewed by the community with suspicion, for his irresponsibility could unleash the spirit's wrath on the entire village, causing floods, plagues, or mass drownings. The Bodianoi, therefore, represents not only the physical danger of water but the constant tension between human ambition to harness nature, the mill, and the untamed power of a spirit that demands a price for every drop of energy stolen from his realm. After meeting the dreaded Bodianoi, we encounter the most famous female figure of the Slavic waters, the Rusalka. The Rusalka is a spirit of great melancholic beauty and seductive danger, a creature of tragic origin who embodies the duality of water, the life it gives and the death it brings. Her origin is always an unfortunate end. It is believed that Rusalkas are the spirits of young women who died prematurely or violently, especially those who drowned, committed suicide for love, or died without being baptized, their souls caught between worlds. Because they did not have a peaceful passage to NAV, they are trapped on earth as vengeful spirits, forever bound to the waters that claim them. It is essential to note that not all Rusalkas are the same. Their geographical domain determines their behavior and appearance, demonstrating the nuanced nature of folklore. River or water Rusalkas are the most common and resemble the classic sirens. They live in deep lakes and rivers, their haunted domains. They possess an ethereal beauty, with green or algae-colored hair and pale skin, almost translucent in the moonlight. Their primary goal is to lure young men with their songs, seductions, or laughter, dragging them to the depths and drowning them, often by tickling them to death, a cruel mockery of joy. Their seduction represents the mortal danger inherent in water, a beautiful trap for the unsuspecting. Field or forest Rusalkas are spirits who inhabit cereal fields and forests during the spring and summer. They are usually more benevolent, though just as volatile. Their primary concern is the fertility of the crops, their laughter echoing through the fields, ensuring the abundance of the harvest. They manifest by dancing in the fields, their movements weaving magic into the earth. However, if disturbed, they can unleash localized storms to damage the crops, a reminder of their power. Beyond drowning men, the most vital power of the Rusalkas, especially those in the field, is their control over celestial water and rain. It was believed that their dances attracted the clouds, releasing the drops needed for growth, sustaining life. The moment of their greatest power was the Rusalnaya Nedelia, the week of the Rusalka, a festival celebrated in late spring, coinciding with Christian Pentecost. During this week, it was believed that the Rusalkas emerged from the water to dance in the fields and forests, blurring the line between worlds. It was a time of taboos, a period of heightened vulnerability. Swimming was forbidden for fear of being dragged to the bottom, and women often hung white clothes near the water as offerings, hoping that the Rusalkas would find something dry to wear, satiating their desires and leaving mortals untouched. The festival culminated with rites to send the Rusalkas back to the water, hoping that as they left, they would leave behind their blessing of fertility, ensuring bountiful harvests. If the spirits of the water stalk at dusk, the spirits of the field stalk under the brightest light of day. The Slavs believed that midday, the moment when the sun is at its zenith and the heat is most oppressive, was a dangerous hour ruled by two spirits of the field. The Polvik or Polboy is the spirit of the cultivated field. Unlike the Leshy, who lives in the forest, the Polvik resides within the boundaries of the cereal fields, a silent guardian of the crops. He is described as having skin made of grass or earth or simply as a small, black, and dusty imp who appears and disappears on the horizon, a fleeting glimpse of the field's essence. His wrath was directed primarily at those who slept or worked during peak midday hours or at twilight, defying the natural rhythm of the sun. If a peasant fell asleep on the border of his field, the Polvik could confuse him, make him sick, or even break his bones, a cruel punishment for laziness. He was the personification of the danger inherent in working under the scorching sun and a mythical justification for illnesses or accidents in the field. The Politniza or midday lady is the female counterpart of the Polvik and the most feared spirit in the field. She is described as a tall woman dressed in white who appears only on the hottest summer days, precisely at noon, when the heat shimmers above the fields like a mirage. The Politnitsa was the guardian of the midday taboo, enforcing the rules of the sun. Her primary punishment was reserved for children who played in the fields and adults who napped under the blazing sun. If she found someone sleeping or working at noon, she attacked them with difficult questions, testing their knowledge. If the victim could not answer or refused, the Politnitsa could twist their head, cause a swift heat stroke, or, more commonly, induce an illness with fever or a stiff neck, crippling them for their transgression. The Polnitsa and the Polvik functioned as the mythological police of the field, ensuring that the peasant respected the rhythm of nature, a constant reminder of the sun's power. They reminded people that even in the most productive place, under the sun of Dashbach, there were always lurking dangers that could punish recklessness and laziness, the spirits ensuring balance. Leaving behind the spirits of home and nature, we enter the realm of battle and magic folklore, where adversaries are often older and more dangerous than the gods themselves. The most terrifying and fascinating figure in this domain is Ki, the immortal. Kos Besmrtny, the archetype of the villainous sorcerer who dominates Slavic fairy tales. K is the epitome of magical evil, a figure of pure, unadulterated malice. He is often depicted as a gaunt, skeletal old man of superhuman strength with fearsome magical power, which he often uses to kidnap the heroine, usually a Tsarevna, princess, imprisoning her in his fortress. However, his true fame lies not in his strength but in the secret that gives him his name. His immortality, a curse and a blessing intertwined. The most defining characteristic of K, and what makes him an almost unbeatable being, is that his life, or his soul, is not in his body, a secret carefully guarded. This is one of the most profound ideas in Slavic mythology, a disintegration of the soul that grants him invulnerability, a horrifying detachment from mortality. The hero must dismantle a series of interconnected objects that house the spark of his existence, a quest fraught with peril. This chain of hiding places is invariable and supremely complex, a riddle wrapped in an enigma. The life or soul of Kochei is hidden in a needle, the core of his being. The needle is inside an egg, a symbol of potential and rebirth, twisted into a tool of death. The egg is inside a duck, a creature of both land and water, further complicating the search. The duck is inside a chest or iron trunk, a fortified container. The chest is buried under a 1,000-year-old oak, a tree of immense strength and longevity, its roots reaching deep into the earth. The oak is planted on an island, a secluded sanctuary. The island, in turn, is located in the middle of the sea, isolating the source of his immortality in the heart of a vast expanse. This sequence is a metaphor for the separation between matter and spirit, a perversion of the natural order. To defeat Kosi, the hero, Bogatars, must not only be strong but also be cunning and persistent, undertaking an epic journey through the three worlds, testing their courage and resolve. Jav for the journey, Nav for the hidden wisdom, requiring passage through both realms. To find the location of this oak, the ultimate goal is the needle, a quest that demands sacrifice. Once the hero breaks the needle, K's power instantly vanishes, and the villain dies without anyone having touched his body, his immortality shattered. In addition to his scattered soul, K maintains a close connection with the magic horse, a steed of immense power. This courser is often the only one capable of carrying him swiftly across the vast Slavic territory, bridging the distances that separate mortal realms. And it is so powerful that its tread feels like an earthquake, shaking the very foundations of the earth. To defeat Koshii, the hero must often obtain his own magic horse of equal power, which is usually found and tamed with the help of Baba Yaga or some other spirit, a powerful ally. The possession of a magic horse is not just a means of transportation but a symbol of power over destiny and the speed with which the borders of realms can be crossed, a tool for shaping one's fate. Koshii, with his dominion over life and death, through his hidden soul and his connection to the boundary-crossing horse, is the representation of the sorcerer who has subverted the natural order, a distortion of the cosmic balance. He has taken control over the cycles of life and death, magic and matter, and therefore must be dismantled magically so that the law and order of the world can be restored, a delicate process. His story is one of the most beautiful Slavic allegories about the fragility of absolute evil, a testament to the enduring power of hope. After the immortal sorcerer, we find the embodiment of physical and elemental danger in Slavic fairy tales. Samay Gorinek or Samay Gorinek, the most famous of the Slavic dragons, a creature of immense destruction. The word Esami simply means snake or dragon, while Gorinek probably derives from Gora, meaning mountain or hill, a connection to the earth itself. This composite name already gives us the key to its nature. The dragon born of the mountain, a being linked to geology and darkness, an ancient force. Setame Gorinek is the embodiment of elemental evil and untamed nature, an unstoppable force. His primary link is with fire and the geography of the deep earth, the primal element of fire, fueling his destructive power. The most feared characteristic of Smile is his ability to spit fire, a terrifying spectacle. This fire is not only a destructive weapon, but it is seen as an element that consumes life in Jav, drying up rivers or burning crops, leaving devastation in its wake. Often, its presence is linked to water scarcity or drought, making it an adversary of the natural order, a bringer of famine. Geography: mountains and caves. The dragon invariably inhabits mountains, hence its epithet Gorinek, and deep caves, often guarding a bridge, river, or strategic pass, controlling vital passages. These underground places are considered entrances to the underworld of Nav, a gateway to the spirit realm. Izmi functions as a guardian of that threshold, a protector of the boundaries between worlds. By living underground, he is associated with material wealth, minerals, and treasures that, like Velis, he steals or hoards from the subsoil, a symbol of greed. The heroes who face him not only fight to rescue a princess or a treasure but to free the normal flow of the waters or the path of men, restoring balance to the world. One of the most notable characteristics of Setmi Gorinek, which underscores his monstrous power, is his polycephalous nature, meaning he has multiple heads, each a source of destruction. Different types of Setmi are distinguished by the exact number of their heads, symbolizing their degree of power and difficulty to defeat, a challenge for even the bravest heroes. 3 heads. This is the most common form that appears in many stories, representing a significant challenge for a young hero testing their limit. 6 or 9 heads. These dragons are adversaries of more experienced heroes and require great cunning and magical strength to overcome, demanding skill and strategy. The difficulty is multiplied because often, if a head is cut off, 2 grow back in its place, making the task seemingly impossible. An archetype of the Hydra. 12 heads. This is the most powerful and rare form, reserved for the most legendary Bogot's heroes like Dobrynya Nikitic, a challenge of epic proportions. A CMI of 12 heads represents the maximum embodiment of chaos that threatens the existence of the Rus, a force of ultimate destruction. Combat against Smy Gornich is not merely physical, a battle of brute strength. Heroes must be very careful, as the dragon's blood is poisonous or has corrosive properties, a deadly liquid. The hero must have a plan to avoid being soaked by the monster's blood, or face a grim fate. In folklore, Smy Gornich functions as the obstacle that a hero must overcome to prove his worth, a test of character. It is the representation of elemental chaos that must be contained so that the order of Slavic society, sustained by Peru, can prevail, ensuring the balance of the cosmos. Of all the beings of folklore, none is as omnipresent, feared, and yet complex as Baba Yaga, the great Isba witch, a figure of legend. She is much more than a simple fairy tale villain. She is a primordial archetype, the embodiment of the wild, the ancient, and the trials that must be overcome to achieve maturity, a force of nature. Babaga is fundamentally the priestess of death and the guardian of the threshold, the magical border between the world of the living and the realm of the dead, a gateway to Nav. Her physical description is deliberately grotesque and terrifying, designed to evoke rot and death, a haunting image. She is often described as a hideous, emaciated old woman of unnatural proportions, a figure of nightmares. Her most famous feature is the long nose that extends to the ceiling of her hut, a detail that suggests a connection with smoke, decay, and the magical sense of smell to detect the living, a hunter of souls. In addition, the tales mention that she has teeth of iron or stone, a characteristic that relates her to cannibalism and the old deities of war who devour their enemies, a terrifying trait. Her choza, by the way, is one of the most iconic images, a cabin that stands on chicken legs, capable of turning at will to hide its only entrance to the forest, a dwelling that defies the natural order. To travel, Baba Yaga uses a couple of highly unusual and symbolic vehicles, a surreal spectacle. Her primary means of transportation is a mortar, stupa, in which she sits or stands, and she uses a mortar hand, pestle, not only as a rudder to propel herself but also to erase her footprints in the forest or the sky, leaving the path as clean as oblivion, a master of disguise. The connection with the mortar and pestle is no coincidence. These are domestic instruments associated with processing and disintegration, reinforcing her connection with death and transformation, a symbol of her power. Baba Yaga's ambiguous role is what makes her so powerfully narrative. Although initially presented as a man-eating danger, her real role in the story is usually that of guardian of the threshold, a key figure in the hero's journey. Her hut is at the end of the journey, in the heart of the forest, where human law fades, where the wild reigns, and the realm of magic begins, an enchanting yet dangerous place. The heroes who come to her abode must overcome her through an initiation rite that can be performing an impossible task or answering a riddle, testing their wisdom and resolve. If the hero demonstrates courage, cunning, humility, and a deep respect for the old rites, Baba Yaga ceases to be an adversary and becomes a guide, providing a magical object, a horse, or the knowledge necessary to defeat greater villains like K, the immortal, offering invaluable aid. She is the final test before the hero returns transformed to the normal world, ready to face their destiny. The figure of Yaga is never monolithic, but adapts to the needs of the story, demonstrating its archetypal nature, a chameleon of the spirit world. This allows us to identify different variations of Yaga in folklore. There is Yagala the cannibal, which is the most terrifying and common version, a creature of pure malice. This Baba Yaga openly seeks to devour the hero, symbolizing the danger that the wild and uncontrolled nature represents for civilization, a threat to the established order. She is the personification of death waiting for the unwary, a grim reaper in the woods. On the other hand, we have Yegal, the protector, who is the version that acts as a magic godmother after testing the hero, a benevolent guide. This variation is moved by her good nature or her obedience to ancient rites and offers invaluable help, giving her the hidden knowledge that resides only on the boundaries of NAV, a beacon of hope. And finally, there is the figure of Yagala the warrior, who often appears with her entourage of 3 mystical riders. The white rider of the day, the red rider of the sun, and the black rider of the night, linking her to elemental forces and making her a figure of immense power, a force of nature. In some narratives, she is the guardian of a well of living water or a magic weapon, a protector of sacred artifacts. In all her roles, Baba Yaga represents the profound truth of Slavic mythology. Death is not an end but a process of transformation guarded by an ancient and fearsome female power, a gateway to rebirth. Her existence demonstrates that the key to success and maturity is not found in the palace of kings but in the wildest and most inhospitable corner of the forest, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. If the gods establish cosmic law in Prav, and the spirits maintain order in Ya, then the Bogatirs are the instruments of that law on the battlefield, protectors of the realm. The Bogatars are the epic heroes of the Bine, the great narrative poems that served as the oral history and military mythology of the Eastern Slavs, a testament to their heritage. Their role was to defend the Rus of Kiev from invaders, monsters, and chaos, embodying the courage, strength, and morality that sustained civilization, the pillars of society. Among all of them, a trio of champions dominates folklore, each representing a social archetype and a distinct form of heroism, a symbol of hope. Il Muramets is, without a doubt, the most revered and powerful of the Bogatirs, the embodiment of faith, resistance, and the brute strength of the Slavic land, a legendary figure. His origin is what makes him so special, defying expectations. He was not born into nobility but into a family of peasants in the village of Murom, a humble beginning. But the most moving thing is his start, a tale of perseverance. Ilya spent the first 33 years of his life paralyzed and prostrate, unable to move his legs, confined to his bed. This immobility is a symbol of the inertia of Slavic society before its heroic awakening, a period of stagnation. His miracle occurs when some mendicant pilgrims or kaliki visit him, bringing hope. The kaliki are not priests but sacred travelers, messengers of fate. They ask Ilya to get up and serve them water, and in that act of obedience and selfless service, Ilya receives a magical force that allows him to stand up for the first time, shattering the shackles of his past. This is a direct blessing from heaven and earth, not from the nobility, a gift of divine power. After being healed and receiving colossal strength, Ilya goes to Kiev, carrying with him the peasant humility, but with the strength of a god, a force to be reckoned with. He is the archetype of the people's hero, the one who defends the border from the Polovzi and the monsters, a champion of the common folk. His most famous feat is the battle against Solovy Razbinik, the robber Ruiznor, a hybrid creature that could kill with its whistle, a terrifying adversary. Ilya, the man of the earth, faces him and defeats him, opening the way to Kiev and symbolizing the victory of human order and the law of Peru over natural chaos and danger, a triumph of civilization. The epic of Ilya is the story of the strength that is born of unwavering faith and patience, a testament to the human spirit. In sharp contrast to the humble origin of Ilya, we find Dobrynya Nikitic, the hero of nobility, culture, and diplomacy, a man of refinement. Dobrynya is a man of the court, a relative of Prince Vladimiro, a figure of influence. And his heroism is based not only on strength but on sophistication, eloquence, and self-control, a pillar of society. He is known for his ability to play the gusli, a Slavic musical instrument, and for his knowledge of customs and languages. He represents the chivalrous ideal of the Rus, a symbol of sophistication. His role in the epic is often more delicate, requiring tact and grace. He is the hero who must keep his word, negotiate peace, and carry out the most complex missions that require touch as much as courage, a diplomat and a warrior. But his greatest moment of glory is his role as the conqueror of Sm Gorinik, the polycephalic dragon, a force of chaos. In the most famous myth, Dobrynya must face the dragon after it kidnaps the prince's niece in battle, a courageous act. Dobrynya remembers an ancestral taboo of not bathing in the same water where the dragon drinks, a sacred rule. By accidentally breaking this taboo, the dragon traps him, and Dobra must fight for his life and the princess, overcoming the beast with his sword and often with the help of the wet Mother Earth, who gives him a magic mass, a gift of immense power. His victory over Sm Gorinik is the reaffirmation of the Peru order over the Voles chaos, restoring balance. An act of cosmic cleansing that restores the flow of waters and the law, a victory for civilization. The third hero of this trio is Alyosha Popovich, whose name translates as the son of the priest Popovich. Alyosha stands out as the youngest, most agile, and least reliant on brute strength of the epic heroes. His power lies not in muscle, but in his sharp wit, cunning, and mischievous nature. He is the hero who embodies the triumph of mind over matter, proving that brains can indeed conquer brawn. Alyosha is a volatile character, at times arrogant and deceitful, traits that make him more human and relatable, less an idealized figure than his companions. He represents the necessary cunning required to navigate the complexities of the world. Instead of a massive warhorse, he often rides a smaller, but exceedingly swift steed. And instead of wielding a heavy, imposing sword, he relies on his intellect to outsmart his adversaries. His most celebrated feat is the defeat of Tugarin Smevich, a monstrous warrior often associated with the fearsome Tatar invaders, or, in more ancient, mythical interpretations, with the very figure of a dragon. Smevich itself translates to son of the dragon, hinting at the primordial nature of this foe. Alyosha doesn't defeat Tugarin in an honorable duel of strength and steel, Rather, he employs trickery and calculated humiliation. He prays to God to send a storm to weaken his powerful enemy, or utilizes a clever verbal trap to make him stumble and fall. Yosha Popovich is a symbol of the rising power of a new generation, one that uses intelligence and unwavering Christian faith, being the son of a priest, to overcome the old pagan powers and the relentless invaders. He demonstrates that faith and wit are weapons just as potent, if not more so, than the forged steel of Ilya Muromets. We've journeyed far through the Slavic cosmos, from the earth-shattering thunder of Purin to the quick-witted ingenuity of Alyosha Popovich. But to truly understand how this vibrant and complex mythology survived the trials of time, we must delve into the historical collision of beliefs, a phenomenon known as dvoevry, or double faith. This term describes the centuries-long coexistence and intermingling of ancient pagan beliefs with the tenets of Orthodox Christianity, a process that resulted in a uniquely syncretic folk faith. The initial clash of this transformative process can be traced back to a specific date and a key figure: the year 988 and Prince Vladimir the Great of Kiev. After a failed attempt to unify the disparate tribes under a single state-sponsored pagan religion, Vladimir made a monumental geopolitical and spiritual decision: to adopt Orthodox Christianity from Byzantium. Vladimir's edict forever altered the trajectory of the Rus. This mass baptism was not a peaceful conversion, however. The prince ordered the destruction of the pagan idols. The grand idol of Purin in Kiev was dragged by soldiers, beaten, and cast into the Dnieper River. Yet, this was merely the beginning. Pagan faith was deeply ingrained in the people's customs, agriculture, and household traditions. Christianization, outside of the cities and centers of power, remained a superficial and often forced process. The peasants in the vast Slavic territories continued to practice their ancestral rites, either moving them underground or cleverly disguising them within a Christian framework. The persistence of these ancient rites became a subtle but powerful form of resistance to the new faith. The Church, realizing that direct confrontation was futile, adopted a strategy of intelligent syncretism and functional substitution. Rather than eradicating pagan rituals, the Church reinterpreted them, assigning Christian saints to assume the roles and responsibilities of the old pagan gods. This process is particularly evident in the most important festivals and holidays. The festival of Burning Morina, symbolizing the end of winter and the coming of spring, was absorbed into Maslenitsa, the butter week that precedes Lent. The summer solstice fertility festival, which honored the sacred marriage of the elements, was transformed into the feast of Ivan Kupala, John the Baptist. Yet, the core rituals of leaping over bonfires, searching for magical flowers, and ritual bathing, all of pagan origin, remained largely unchanged. However, the most overt and powerful substitution occurred with the two great cosmic rivals. The cult of Purin, the god of thunder and lightning, was transferred to Saint Elijah, the prophet Ilya Prorok. Saint Elijah, according to biblical tradition, ascended to heaven in a chariot of fire, and in Slavic folklore, he became the saint who rides a chariot through the clouds, unleashing storms with his divine wrath and thunderous lightning bolt. The liturgy changed, but the fear and reverence for thunder remained deeply embedded in the culture. The cult of Veles, the god of magic, cattle, and the underworld, was transferred to Saint Blaise or Sveti Vlasai. Saint Blaise is the Christian saint who became the patron saint of livestock and protector of domestic animals. His name bore a resemblance to Veles, and his function aligned perfectly with the old serpent god. Thus, the peasant could continue to honor the guardian of his wealth and prosperity without falling into the condemnation of heresy. This double faith allowed the Slavic people to live in two worlds simultaneously. They prayed to God in church, but also left offerings of milk for the domovoi, the house spirit, in their homes. They were baptized with holy water, yet swore oaths by the wet Mother Earth in the fields. At the heart of this cultural resistance were the folkvi, singular, folkv, the pagan priests, magicians, and shamans of the ancient Slavic faith. They were the guardians of ancestral knowledge, the interpreters of the laws of Prav, the right way, and the negotiators with the spirits of Nav, the underworld. The folkvi were powerful figures in Slavic society. They could prophesy, heal illnesses, and, most importantly, perform the sacrifices and rituals that guaranteed a bountiful harvest and victory in war. Following Vladimir's edict, the folkvi became the focal point of pagan resistance. Many retreated into the forests, keeping the ancient faith alive in secret, while others led uprisings against the Christian princes and bishops. Dramatic clashes occurred, such as the revolt in Suzdal in the 11th century, where the folkvi acted as political and religious leaders, demonstrating that the old faith would not surrender easily. Although the church eventually managed to marginalize them and condemn them as witches and sorcerers, the folkvi's influence never completely disappeared. Their role became diluted into the figures of the village sorcerer, Kolden, or the healer, Znakarka, who continued to practice healing magic and divination well into the 20th century. They are the last vestiges of the pagan hierarchy, the living chain that kept the echoes of Purin and Veles resonating throughout the vast and cold Slavic territories. Descending into the darker strata of folklore, we encounter beings that represent the most violent rupture with the natural and social order, the undead and the werewolves. These are creatures whose very existence mocks the cycles of life and death, of Yav and Nav in the Slavic world. The Yupper, plural Yupari, the precursor to the modern vampire, and the Vukadlak, plural Vukadlaki, the werewolf. The most common form of werewolf were not simply monsters born from chaos, but beings whose origin lay in a violation of cosmic or ecclesiastical law. The genesis of these creatures is almost always rooted in an unnatural death or a life marked by transgression. Yupari, or vampires, were believed to arise from individuals who had led an evil life, sorcerers, or those who had died by suicide or excommunication. But the most feared origin was the death of a heretic or someone who had broken sacred oaths, breaking the law of Purin. Upon death, the earth, Mat Syra Zemlya, refused to accept them, causing their bodies to remain animated, rising from the grave to feed on the blood of the living and spread disease. Vukadlaki, or werewolves, were a form of lycanthropy that stemmed from a curse, a wound inflicted by another werewolf, or, curiously, from individuals conceived during the sacred time of Rizalnaya Nedelia, the week of the Rusalka, or those excommunicated by the Church. Exclusion from the order of Prav, and the Church condemned them to assume the savage animal form, combining the brute strength of a wolf with human intelligence. The threat they posed was so grave that elaborate rituals were developed to prevent transformation into the undead. Upon the death of a suspected individual, villagers would exhume the body and perform ritualistic acts to ensure the spirit remained in Nav. This included driving a stake of ash or aspen wood through the heart, severing the tendons behind the knees, or, in extreme cases, decapitation and cremation of the body. These rituals were society's most extreme way to assert order over chaos and protect the community from the contamination of inverted death. In contrast to the horror of the undead, folklore also addresses the more subtle and essential magic of personal destiny. The Sujanis were the female spirits of fate, often associated with the Rajanis, the deities of childbirth. Their name comes from the Slavic word for judgment or destiny. These figures were not major goddesses, but rather beings who operated on the plane of individual lives, deciding a person's fate. They were weavers who spun the thread of life, much like Mokash, but focused specifically on matters of love and marriage. Their greatest significance was manifested in the rites of predicting a future spouse. Young women often performed divination rituals, especially on the eves of major magical holidays like Kaliada and Ivan Kupala. Women sought them out for clues about their future spouse. The most common divination act involved a mirror, water, or the throwing of shoes, seeking to have the Sujanis reveal the identity or direction of the future husband who was known as the Sujani, the destined one. The belief in the Sujanis underscored that romantic destiny was not entirely random. It was a thread woven by magical forces that, if approached with the proper ritual, could be glimpsed. As we culminate our journey, it is essential to recognize that this rich cosmogony is not merely a collection of ancient stories confined to the pages of folklore book. Slavic mythology, with its dualistic gods, its protective spirits, and its epic heroes, has survived Christianization and the Soviet era, finding a vibrant presence in the 21st century through art, music, and a spiritual resurgence. The imagery of Purin, Veles, Baba Yaga, and the Bogaders has become an inexhaustible source of inspiration during the nationalistic and cultural awakenings of the 19th and 20th centuries, demonstrating that old myths are the very foundation of modern identity. In painting, artists like Viktor Vasnetsov in the 19th century dedicated their lives to portraying the epic world of the Byliny, epic poems. His canvases capture the grandeur of the Bogaders and the magic of the landscape. Nicholas Rurik in the 20th century, with his fascination for ancestral themes and Eastern spirituality, painted mystical scenes of ancient Rus, imbuing his works with the atmosphere of pagan rituals and the power of nature. In music, Slavic folklore provided dramatic themes and powerful rhythms to classical compositions. Composers like Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov drew inspiration from folklore and legends, a clear example being his opera, May Night, which evokes the Rysalki, water nymphs. But perhaps the most famous case is that of Igor Stravinsky, whose work, The Rite of Spring, Le Sacre du Printemps, not only revolutionized 20th century music but is explicitly based on pagan rituals of sacrifice to fertility, directly evoking the brutal and cyclical forces of Yarilo and Morina. In cinema and literature, this mythology has inundated modern fantasy. From Soviet fairy tale films like Morozko to contemporary literature and video games, the characters of Leshy, Kikimora, and Baba Yaga are recurring figures who define the genre of Slavic dark fantasy. The last decade has seen a remarkable spiritual phenomenon in several Slavic countries. The resurgence of ancient cults known as Rodnovery, literally native faith or faith of the kin. Rodnovery is a modern religious movement that seeks to reconstruct and practice pre-Christian pagan belief. Its followers directly honor the gods of the pantheon, Purin, Veles, Svarog, and Mokosh, and revive ancestral rituals, often in natural places considered sacred, such as forests and hills. This movement represents a quest for cultural identity and a way to reconnect with historical roots and the ecological wisdom that predates imported religions. The existence of Rodnovery is living proof that although Catholicism and Orthodoxy have dominated, the seed of native faith never fully died. Our exploration of this Slavic cosmos leaves us with a final reflection. Mythology, in its essence, is not only about gods in the sky, but about the eternal connection between people and their land. Mat Syra Zemlya, the cycle of Purin and Veles, of Yarilo and Morina. It is not a whimsical tale, but a guide to survival and a recognition that life in the vast and extreme Slavic territories is a constant negotiation between order and chaos. Myths were embedded in every village, in every celebration, in every oath, and on the door of every home. Christianity may have changed the names of the guardians, but it could not sever the deep and physical bond of the peasant with the moisture of their soil, the ferocity of the thunder, and the promise of renewal. This is the testament to how the Slavic soul continues to breathe, not only in books, but in the music that evokes the magic of the forest, in the persistence of winter's maslenitsa, and in the whisper of the elders who, when they see lightning, still think of the axe of an old god protecting the law. It is a story of resilience that demonstrates that the triple cosmos of Prav, Yav, and Nav remains the map that defines the world. I hope you enjoyed this tale, and that it helped you relax while listening to a bit of good history. This is the Night Historian, your faithful companion for your sleepless night. If you enjoyed the tale, leave your good like and subscribe, so that you become part of this nocturnal and cultured community. I want you to comment on what other topic you would like us to talk about in a future video. We read each comment carefully. Thank you for listening to me. Until the next adventure.